All right, everyone, Joe Biden doing it again. This is the exact same premise and gaffe that he's actually had happen several times before, and it ties into like the Robert Byrd thing and the segregation fight, etc., etc., wherein Joe Biden, what he's trying to get across is actually a decent optical message, which is, hey, back in my day, 50, 60 years of friggin' ago, people in Congress, they could work together. You'd have fiery debates, and the idea is, well, we would debate all sorts of terrible things where we couldn't possibly see eye to eye, and some of these people basically had scummy ideas, but then we were able to sit down and have lunch together. The problem is that Joe Biden's preface to this is his working with segregationists, post-segregation, of course, in the 1970s mainly, working with people that had been on the forefront of that. Saying, well, I sat down and had lunch with people who had promoted segregation and we were reasonably chummy with one another. You know what Biden's trying to do. He's trying to drum up some support on the fringe of the Republican Party, like the Romneys and Cheneys of the party, to get something actually passed. I don't think that anything that he's promoted should be passed. I think that he's an absolute turd, and he's nuts. But the idea is, hey, if I can get 51% of you morons to support something, then, my presidency won't be foundering quite so much, although the few things he's passed before didn't really help him. Cue inflation. The problem, again, is that you're talking about segregationists. It looks like you're reminiscing about the segregation era. That's what it looks like, especially out in little context here. It looks like Joe Biden's, my God, we worked with segregationists, and even then we could sit down to lunch. The intonation, the insinuation is, hey, the Republicans are worse than the segregationists. A hyperbolic statement that I've literally seen echoed in the last couple of days, post, Roe v. Wade leak, on that particular issue. Well, MAGA is the most extreme movement the country's ever seen, said Joe Biden literally the other day. That's an insinuation. The other insinuation is Republicans in Congress. I'm calling you extremists. I'm insinuating that you're worse than the Ku Klux Klan, but I wish that you would vote for some of my legislation. Not exactly a working practice, but this is not the first time that Joe has done this. He has done this over and over again with his optics fails. And you'll remember that the exact same line, almost verbatim, that he's using here, he used during the primaries before he was even the Dem nominee. He also used it in the general election, saying, oh, I had to work with these segregationist people, and even they were more sane than the modern Republican Party. It's just like Swalwell the other day saying that the Republicans won't stop with abortion. They want to ban interracial marriage, a massively ratioed concept because he couldn't provide even a single individual past maybe the 1980s who's been in any federal office, certainly in most state offices, who actually promotes the concept. There are like 2 remaining states in the whole U.S. where there's a pulse to the concept of anti-miscegnation laws. It's like Alabama and Mississippi. Okay, the Republican Party is also in control of a slurry of other states. And by the way, not all of those states seem geared up to change their abortion laws post Roe v. Wade likely getting shot down. So where's the argument for them going much, much further? They're the GOP. They're not the party of being given an inch and taking a mile, or even being given a yard and taking a yard and a couple of extra inches. They're the party where you hand them a massive-ass mandate. You can give them a presidency, stacked courts, supermajority in the Senate, majority in the House. You can give them every state house. They would freeze up like a deer in the headlights and do very little. That's what conservative movements tend to do. They're not really conservative in the sense of, hey, we're going to go back to, a better time. They're more like, well, the liberal policies that have already gotten past us, we'll maintain all of them, but not one more policy. The party of doing nothing effectively. That's why Trump scared them so much. He scared off half of the corporate Republicans, and now they all donate to the Democrats because they're afraid because he actually stood for substantive change. They wanted Jeb Bush or something. No, it's the Democrats that do that. They're the party that, when given an inch, attempts to take a mile. They're doing it right now. You've got the slimmest possible mandate for the Democratic Party given within Hong Kong elected president, a 50-50 Senate, barely any House majority that, by the way, is going bye-bye in the midterms regardless of what happens probably at this point. And they act like they have this massive supermajority and the public will behind them. But you never had the public will behind you. Majority of Americans hate the direction the country is going in. The situation is now worse under Biden by far than it has been in a very, very long time. In living memory for the average person, Biden's sitting there reminiscing about the segregationists. It's terrible optics. I mean, it's like they get rid of Psaki. She decides to wander off to MSNBC. Now they've got an individual whose qualifications to be press secretary are basically id poll related, if you know what I'm talking about, to be the wagon circler and the circler back arounder in chief for the asterisk administration. And Biden's sitting there talking about segregation. You can't have it both ways. You can play up to the left with the id poll thing and have diversity hires in your cabinet and talk a big game about racial justice and LGBT issues. Or you can look like you're nostalgic for the 1950s, which is, I believe, when Biden he was a little kid at the time. They're back in the corn pop period. It's been a while. You can do one or the other. You can't really do both. The Democrats also, they've had this problem already. The Democrats spent decades whining and dining left-wing and id poll movements, and then doing absolutely nothing for the people they claimed that they were going to work for once they were in office. Over and over, they got into office and they balked at doing anything. Obama's the greatest example of this, Biden having been his VP. He learned from the best. Remember when Barack Obama, in the wake of fracking taking off, decided not to do anything and ignored the environmental lobbies that were saying to ban the practice and saying, no more drilling. And he said, oh, go ahead, exploratory drilling on federal land is a great idea, and I love this natural gas thing. It was one of the better moments in his presidency when he didn't listen to the leftards. You'll remember that. When he campaigned, it was all climate change is going to kill us all. The world is going to resemble Tatooine soon. But this is economics. Let's drill it out of the ground because it's ours and we'll make money doing it. Good idea. Not exactly what you campaigned on. This has been a problem for the Democrats. They keep making all these promises that they can't fulfill or won't want to fulfill to morons, and then finally those morons, because they've become more prominent over time, now you have to pay the piper. Those morons now demand that you do the things that they want you to do. Again, being nostalgic about having reached across the aisle to shake hands with Robert Byrd, although he didn't have to reach very far because, of course, the Klan was a Democratic edifice mainly. Southern Democrats. Okay, we'll use the colloquial term that the Democrats prefer to use. Dying breed, by the way, admittedly. Why would you even bring that up? Especially within 24 hours of deciding that a black lesbian is going to be the White House press secretary, you're insinuating that you had a good time dealing with the segregationists. Yeah. See, the optics of the admin just don't add up. This is the incompetence side. If it weren't for the incompetence, things would probably be worse. Because there's definitely malevolence there, the Great Reset style malevolence that we've seen, where they want people to be poor, so they have to live in a pod and eat the bugs and stuff. They want them to be poor, they want them to be sick, they want the United States to recede on the world stage of history. They are more quiet about this than Obama was, by the way. He stated it openly. Americans need to learn to deal with less. We're not going to live in a monopolar world anymore. How wonderful. Biden's accomplishing that goal right now. But he's from the funny farm. He's nuts. I'm glad that he's demented and incompetent because at the very least, the behind-the-scenes puppeteering that's being done by the super corrupt, like the Klaus Schwab, George Soros style crowd, is actually hampered by having Joe Biden there because there's no way it becomes a lot harder to push through any policies behind closed doors or not when you have a double-digit disapproval gap and you have someone who can't make the case to the American people why they should destroy their own economy, etc., etc. By the way, they are currently gearing up, the White House is, to bring COVID back to the table before the midterms, coincidentally, Hong Kong. They are planning to do that. I'll be talking about that at some point in the near future because you can expect They'll want to lock down again like China because it promotes their authoritarianism. They want you to be poor. They don't want your small business to flourish. They want people to go grocery shopping at Walmart so they can be fat and sick and die. That's about all. Peace out.